just thought I'd jump on here and talk a little bit about the difference between 1K and 2K products, when to use 1K, when to use a 2K. And so, first of all, just to explain the difference, a 1K product would be a single component product with no catalyst or hardener added. And then you have a 2K product, which a lot of products are can be used as a single component or a double component. They can be used 1K or 2K. 2K meaning you can add a catalyst or hardener. And then you have a third category, which would be a true 2K, where you need to add a catalyst or hardener. And so you have basically those three categories in water-based cabinet coatings for sure. You have the single component, and then the double, the ones you can use either way, and then you have a true 2K. And in the solvent world, there's basically two categories from my experience. You have the single component, which would be like a pre-cat lacquer. And this is something that was used in a lot of mass-produced kitchens, um, high volume kitchens where they just mass-produce cabinets. And a lot of builder-grade cabinets were done with um, pre-cat lacquers. And then you have the conversion varnish, which is a 2K lacquer as well. Everybody knows that conversion varnish has been like the gold standard in the cabinet industry. That's like the top of the line. That's like the standard in the industry. And conversion varnish definitely has its place. I would say conversion varnish is a great product for someone working in a shop with the proper ventilation and spray booth. And but conversion varnish is not something you want to use in a refinish job, and I'll tell you why shortly. So let's talk first of all about the number one issue with a single component or 1K product. And this is true for water-based or solvent. So if you're using a single component water-based or a pre-cat lacquer, a solvent lacquer, the issue is water resistance. And that's the biggest thing you're going to see in a kitchen. And yes, there's chemical resistance, there's scratch resistance, there's it takes longer to cure. There's a lot of things about a single component product that it makes it different, and doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means there's a proper place to use it and there's a place to not use it. And I would strongly recommend to not use a single component product. I don't care whether it's a pre-cat lacquer or if it's a single component water-based product in a kitchen. And here's why: because the main thing in the kitchen is water, and also durability, because kitchens are high use areas and a lot of work is done there. So yes, you want something that's hard and durable. Now, is there ever a time to use a single component in a kitchen? Absolutely. There's, you know, maybe apartments, or you're doing like a quick turnaround on something to sell, a house. I don't know. There's probably times and places to do it. I know a lot of guys that are using single component products, but if you want something that's going to be durable and last, customers looking for the best quality finish for kitchen cabinets, it's going to be a 2K. And and now let's talk about why a water base in a refinish job. Well, um, a conversion varnish, like I said, is kind of like the gold standard. So why not use that in a refinish? Well, conversion varnish actually gets very hard. It gets hard. So it's ideal for spraying individual cabinets and individual doors. But the problem with using it in a refinish job, well, two problems. One of them just being the VOCs and the smells. Like to spray that in someone's home, and the smells are terrible, and the smells linger. They're going to off gas for a while. So you could do it in a new home, perhaps, where people aren't going to be in the house for a while. But the problem with spraying like a complete run of cabinets with conversion varnish is that it's too hard for a continuous run where you're spraying over the joints. Maybe you're caulking between joints or caulking between crown and cabinetry. Those joints are going to fail because it's just too hard. It's not flexible enough. And so And so what I found is that that is an issue. I used to do a lot of that. I actually sprayed a lot of kitchens with pre-cat lacquer, and I've also went up to conversion varnish. I use conversion varnish, and I love conversion varnish. I would spray with conversion varnish if I could. But like I said, VOCs is a big issue, but I had this issue of cracking. Unless you have some way of mitigating paint on the joints between, where the cabinets meet, which I'm not sure how you're going to do that in a refinish job. With new cabinetry, you're spraying one cabinet at a time, and then you install them together, so it's not an issue. Great way to do brand new cabinetry. Okay, so when should you use a single component product? Well, if you're doing like built-in cabinets, anything that's not close to water and something that's not like a high use item. Furniture, for example, great place to use a single component product or a bi-component like a 1K, 2K product. I have found that a 2K, a true 2K, if you're going to use something with a catalyst, to use a true 2K, there's just less issues than trying to use the bi-component product as a 2K. Even though it's meant to do that, it can be done that way. It's a different formula for a true 2K. You're going to have less issues, micro bubbles. Some of that stuff just kind of goes away when you use a true 2K. A true 2K usually uses a higher catalyst ratio, like the Renner 688 that I've got shown right here. That one uses a 15% catalyst ratio. And the same with, I've used ICA True 2K. I think it's their 800 series. That one uses like a 15% catalyst ratio. And here's the thing with refinishing a kitchen cabinetry, the catalyst actually helps with adhesion because the catalyst is actually a solvent, I believe. And so what it does, it kind of eats into the previous finish and does, it kind of eats into the previous finish, and you're going to have much better adhesion with a true 2K product than you will with a single component product, or even a 2K product with a lower catalyst ratio. So here's a question that somebody just asked on one of the Facebook groups, and so it's one of the reasons I wanted to come on here was just to give my thoughts about that. When should you use a 2K primer or top coat or both? And why would you use a 2K primer? So a 2K primer is, number one, for adhesion. Like I was saying, that catalyst in there is going to help with adhesion and durability. And also it's going to help with stain blocking. So there's a lot of companies trying to make a stain blocking single component primer, and some of them might work. I don't know. They're a different formula. Usually there's other things that, like they might have longer dry times, recoat times. You just want to really check some of that before you try it, because it's just going to be a little different. So if you're going to use 2K in the top coat, by all means use 2K in the primer, absolutely, because a true 2K system the whole way through is the best system you're going to have for stain blocking, adhesion, water resistance. And I have found that, some time back I was using vinyl sealer for my primer because, number one, it's single component, it dries super quick, it's stain blocking, and then you can just spray your top coat on top of it like very quickly. But I have found I've had issues with that with adhesion, and so I've totally went away from vinyl sealer, and also the VOCs. Like the smells are ridiculous. I know a lot of people are using bin primer, bin shellac, kind of the same way that some of us were using I was going to say conversion varnish, vinyl sealer. But bin has a little the same issue. Bin is very smelly. Bin does dry quickly. You can sand it nicely. So yeah, a lot of people are using bin. And I think possibly if you use it correctly, it can be done. But I've also heard a lot of horror stories where people are having issues with bin being too hard and brittle. And the same issue, I think, I'm going to guess, it's the same issue as conversion varnish, where you have cabinets coming together, and right on that joint where there's a little bit of movement with time, there's going to be cracking. So I would personally just totally stay away from anything hard and brittle like that. And when I switched from conversion varnish to um, a water-based polyurethane like Renner or Malaysia or ICRO, I don't care what it is, these coatings are much more flexible. I have zero issues with that cracking happening on the joints of cabinetry. And so, of course, you want to make sure your cabinet joints are tight as possible. I often run a little bit of caulk in there before primer, and then put 2 coats of primer over that, and then your top coat over that. And as long as that isn't loose, and you can't wiggle the cabinets, you want to get them as tight as you can. I have not had an issue with those coatings cracking because they're just more flexible. So let's talk yet a little bit about the difference between the durability of a conversion varnish versus a water-based true 2K finish. I know a lot of people say they don't even come close, the water-based doesn't come close. And I think people have had bad experiences with water-based. They've tried, some older products from Sherwin-Williams perhaps, and maybe just single component products. But I want to tell you that a good true 2K product, an Italian-based product like the Renner 688 and the ICA 800 series, and I'm sure there's other ones out there, that the true 2Ks are absolutely as good as, if not better than, a conversion varnish. And I'm not going to say they're better, but I would say as good as. And here's how I'm confident about that, especially when it comes to water resistance. They may not get as hard as a conversion varnish, and so perhaps could be scratched a little easier. So I'll admit that that could be the case. However, there again, if you're doing refinishing of cabinets, you want some you need that flexibility, and it still gets hard. The Renner 688 is called an anti-scratch. I like it because I do a lot of refacing by the way, and refacing, you're putting a lot of pressure on the facing materials. You're putting those on hard with a roller and with a scraper, not a scraper, but one of those, things you put pressure on the veneers. And the 688 just holds up very well. It doesn't scratch, it doesn't burnish. So that's something to watch for too. Some coatings just burnish more when you scrape them with your fingernail. So the Renner 688 True 2K just works for me for the refacing. And let me go back to what I was saying about the test. The true test of water resistance is I had some scrap doors and some toe kick materials that were left over that I left out in the weather. They were out all winter. This was a while back, but I tried it again with the ICA. I just purposely left some toe kick pieces out in the rain. So they were out in the rain and snow. They got soaked, and the plywood was delaminating, and the wood on the plywood was delaminating. This was toe kick pieces made out of 3/4 plywood. But the astounding thing to me was the finish. It did not touch the finish. I could not peel the finish even with my fingernail. So the water did not do anything to that. The cabinet door was a single piece door, an MDF door. And so that being out for probably 6 months, part of the summer and in the winter was filled with ice and snow. And it did, in a few places, swell just a little bit, but it didn't lift the paint. But, it was an MDF door. And I think it wouldn't matter what you'd build that out of. Being out in the weather for that long, it would have been a whole lot worse with a pre-cat lacquer or a single component product. Absolutely. A whole lot worse. That paint would have come right off. So, yes, those are my thoughts about single component and a true 2K, and my thoughts about conversion varnish versus a water-based product. So, if you have any more questions for me on that, put that in the comments. Maybe you have some thoughts or experiences. I'd love to hear that. One other thing I was going to mention was about primers. So I do recommend a 2K primer. Now, if you're doing brand new cabinetry on, raw wood, new cabinet doors, you don't really have to go with the true 2K primer. If you want, you could do something like a Renner 648. That one only uses 5% catalyst, and I like that primer for brand new cabinets and brand new doors. But on a refinish job where you want good stain blocking, good adhesion, then use the Renner 643. 643 has just been a staple product in the industry for quite a few years. Really good for, yeah, stain blocking. And here's the thing about stain blocking too that a lot of people don't understand is that a primer will get some stains coming into the primer. And like if you're refinishing and you get some tannins or stain, whatever it is, you're going to see maybe some browning and some yellowing in some spots. But if you let that 2K product dry overnight, it's going to lock those stains in there. You don't have to recoat that. It's not going to come into your top coat. I've done many kitchens that way where the primer was turning yellow and brown in some spots, but I left it dry overnight. I've never had to go back and touch up the top coat. I can't say that though about vinyl sealer. Vinyl sealer, I've had some issues with stains sometimes coming through. So I've a lot of confidence in the Renner 643 2K for refinishing, stain blocking, good adhesion. It's a really good primer. And there's other good ones out there too, but get something with a little higher catalyst ratio. That one has a 10% catalyst ratio. Stay away from a stay away from something with a low catalyst ratio if you're really looking for good adhesion and good stain blocking, and let it dry good, let it cure overnight. So those are my thoughts on that, and we'll talk to you later.